Hey everyone, I'm Patrick Brown. This is part 3 of the Miles Morales tutorial. This is the final art, but I'll show you how to make this from scratch. In the first tutorial, I showed you how to go through the rough sketching stage, and in part 2, I showed you how to do the inks, which will hold the character together and make it look bold. Now it's time to jump into the coloring and rendering. Doing the coloring is a pretty fun part. So, I don't know if you remember last week, I did this really dark shading, so we'll probably use that. That's going to cover a lot of ground. Let's start with flat colors. Now again, I'm using Clip Studio Paint here. I like to do all my rendering in Clip Studio Paint, but later on I'll put it into Photoshop to do all the last effects and things like that. We need to lay out some flat colors first, so underneath my outlines layer, I'll put it right at the bottom. And I'll just call it, we'll just call it fill, just because it's going to be the fill color. And so we've got our overall outlines here. So what I'll do is I'll just get my, the magic wand. And I'm going to click in the white area on the outside, because that'll just wrap around all of his outlines, as long as it's all closed in. As long as I've connected and closed all the lines. So I've clicked on the outside. I like to hold shift and just tap again, which will just add to that. And it just kind of really hugs in on those outlines a little bit more. And then I'm going to Control Shift I, and that's going to invert that selection. So it's literally just selecting Miles now. And then I'm going to go to Selection, Shrink. I want to just shrink it by 1. And what that'll do is that's just going to bring it down. See here, my selection is now inside and under the black. But if I didn't do that, it's a bit too close to the white. And when you have your colors, they can kind of just show a little bit. It's a little bit odd. So I really like to I like to tuck them under the black outlines a little bit more. Okay, and then I'm going to fill my coloring. So we need to choose a color for Miles here. I'm just going to go with a real navy kind of gray to start with. Maybe like that, and a little bit of saturation, not too much. And then I'll fill that. And I just need to put in a red now. And I'll select a nice red for Miles. So probably there, not too saturated and strong, just kind of like a mid-range, quite bright kind of red. And I'll just start using my fill bucket thing. And we're going to fill that right there, and just going to keep going. Okay, so I've laid out all the flat colors now. So what I usually like to do when I'm about to start doing my shading is I don't really like to work on a background that's white anymore. I used to, but I think it's actually quite important to fill that in with a gray, just a light medium gray, because you have to think of it in the way of, how are they going to end up in the end? They're not really going to be on any kind of white backdrop at all. It's not going to be that bright white. There's going to be a city, there's going to be all this stuff, and overall it's going to have, a darker shade to it. So the background I mean. So I think it's important to start when rendering to actually lay a bit of a grey down. I learned that the hard way like a long time ago. I found that when I worked on a white background, my finished characters they'd be very saturated and a bit too bright themselves, because my eye was kind of just thinking white and bright. But when I'm working on a grey, everything just goes a bit more natural. Anyway, I thought that was important to add. Alright, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to make a new layer above the fill. So I'm going to be making a layer for every level of cell shading. So what I'm going to do is I'm holding Alt, and I'm just going to tap, we've already got it, but I'm just making sure that I tap the light grey of Miles' suit there. I have it here, but what I like to do is I drag mine down to probably just a bit, so it's quite dark. So there we have it there. And I'm just going to, that's the color that we're going to be using for all the shading now. And that's it. I'm just going to be sticking to that shade of grey, which is just a bit darker than the one on his suit right now. So with that layer above, I'm going to actually take it down to about 50%. This one, I'm actually pressing B now until I get to this airbrush, the soft airbrush. And I'm using that. I'm just gonna hide the red. We're gonna hide all the red and the red webbing, most of it. I'm actually gonna hide the dark shading for now. And this is the first step. I'm actually going to be doing an airbrush, really soft kind of, let's do it, put that to 100% so you can see exactly what I'm doing for now. I'm literally just darkening around until I'm happy with, this is kind of just like a soft shading. Overall, just whack it in. Doesn't really have to be precise. All right. Now, like I said, that's pretty important. So we're going to fade that back down to 50%. Doesn't have to be perfect, just whatever. Okay, and I'm going to go another layer above. Don't have to name them or anything because this is just shading. And sorry, this is where I use my pen tool for the cell shading. So this is going to bring in all the sharp shading that I do. So with that new layer, just making sure, I will actually take that down to, I like to take to about 55%. And then we begin. I will need to bring back that shadowing layer. Since that's going to be so dark, we want to just go around that. I'm not going to repeat myself with that one there, as in like, I don't want to repeat all this shading that I did. So now I can draw like this around it. Do you know what I mean? So, all right, this is the tricky part. So I need to try and really think about where I'm adding all the rendering. And I'm trying to think of all the muscles and where they belong, and then I'm just kind of forming around that. So under his belly here is going to be quite dark. Another thing to remember with this shading that I'm doing right now is it's one of those ones you don't really have to think too hard about it, because this is the first level of shading, which means I'm actually going to go quite bold with it and really fill in a lot of areas like this and not really worry about it too much. Because as I go through the dark shades, they get smaller and smaller in size. So this is the biggest one and I'm doing more mass. I'm really just thinking about covering more ground with this layer here, so if that makes sense. So under his arm completely, I'm really just filling all that in under his arm. I'm not going to worry too much about that for now. And yeah, like I said, so I'm probably going to cover all that part there with those muscles. I'm actually going to cover it all because we're covering a lot of ground with this first layer here. So how about I just keep filling this out? We'll just speed this up a little bit so you can see what I'm doing, and then I'll explain some more. Okay, so I have fully rendered with that first layer now, and as you can see, like I said, I've covered a lot of ground on it, so I haven't done. What I mean by that is, instead of just doing little bits of shading like this, you know, where I'm doing just little bits like that and just thinking of it like that, that's not a good way to think about it, because I'm only covering little bits, little smaller sections there, like little bits, and that's not what you want to think about. So that's that part. What I wanted to do was boom, like a lot. So you really want to just, the first layer is lots of shading. So overall, just where you can think, because it's going to be quite faint, and then we're going to add it, each layer that goes above this. What I'm talking about is I'm about to do a new layer, and that will be the darker, just another shade of darkened over that. So, and that'll be smaller sections. Also, I thought I might mention as well, as you can see, I'm rendering the entire body, which includes the red tones as well. Even though you can't see the red here, what I'll be doing later is colorizing those red bits with this render. So these red sections that are flat now, they're going to be rendered later using what's underneath here.
Okay, so now that we have the first layer of shading done, I'm going to move on to the next one. So what I'm going to do is make a new layer above that one, and I'm going to set it to multiply, and I usually take it down to 50% also. And the reason that I have it set to multiply is just so that it just makes it a little bit darker, and it still keeps any shading that I have underneath relevant as well. Okay, so I just need to make a selection so I don't go outside of the lines, and yeah, and now I'm just kind of brushing around smaller little portions, so just little parts that need just an extra touch of shading. So this is kind of like the minimal, just a bit smaller touches of dark shading that I'm going to do, and it's just going to add that, kind of enhance that cell shading look a little bit more and make it look more detailed. You see what I mean here around the leg, and it's just added that little bit more depth or rendering to it. It makes it feel a little bit more 3D-ish. And I'm going to keep just touching up little bits here and there. So I'll just continue through here, and I'll show you what I mean. I'm just going to do a bit more of this with these, a few more touches on this, and then I'll explain it a little bit more at the end. Okay, so now that the extra level of shading is complete, you can see the kind of effect it has on the character now. So if I just hide that layer, that's what we had before, and that's what we've got now. So I'm just switching it on and off, and you can just see. So that really helps, just that little bit more, and that's as much as I need to kind of do with that. The next thing we're going to do is lighting, and we're going to add all those lighting touches.
It's going to be the same, very much the same kind of effects as, the same technique as we've just done with the shading. So what I do is we'll go back to the bottom, probably above the soft shading though, and we'll make a new layer, and I usually do the next 3 layers of lighting instead of shading. I'm going to actually hold Alt and grab that shade there, so we go back to that medium tone. This just helps me get an idea. And now I'm going to rise that up into more of a light grey, about there. And again, we're going to probably do a soft, with the soft brush, we're going to do some really soft lighting. Over the top, just in some certain areas, just like this, and especially on those fingertips there, just a bit more there, nice and strong, and on the top of the head there as well. And don't worry, it's not going to be this light when I'm done with it. This is just so I can, hang on, there we go. And a bit more on the chest there, because that's where the light will hit, and then a little bit on the ribs, and no, not really going to touch there. We're just going to do a bit on the leg and the foot, and that should be about right. Okay, so I want to get that now and fade it back to 50 like I did before with the shading, and then I'm going to go a new layer above that. And I'll take that down to 50 as well, about 55 probably. And I'm going to use my sharp pen tool, and I'm going to use that to start doing the big, I'm going to, like I did before, we're going to try and cover a lot of ground with the lighting this time. So I'm not really going to hold back, just kind of thinking about where I can place this and go from there. And I'll just do this, and then we'll come back to it.
So one thing I'm thinking of when I'm doing all this is I'm kind of thinking of the shiny or glossy part of his suit, you know, so not trying to make it look too metallic or anything, but I just think this cell shaded look is really good for these kind of suits. So I'm trying to take advantage of that, and that's why I've set the tone of this one a little stronger so that we can really have it stand out. And yeah, you can just see as I'm going, I'm just trying to think of the most highlighted part, like where the light might hit it most, because the light would be coming from the top left or so. And yeah, and also as I get to the next level here, which is the new layer above, and it's even stronger. So now I'm thinking of extra highlights, extra strong, and I'm thinking of that glossy look that I want to achieve with this. And I can even touch up little corners and little edges. This one's more precise, so I'm not covering any kind of large portions. I'm literally just doing little touches and little strokes to add detail and you know, really make it kind of pop. This is the layer that will really make it pop and feel a little extra shiny and a little bit glossy. So yeah.
Okay, so it's fully rendered now. So I've done all the, you know, the shading and the lighting and everything. So I'll show you what I'll do next. It's all about playing around. So I open it up into Photoshop now. It's just a little bit easier for me to play around with, I think, just years and years of Photoshop. I just feel way more comfortable doing it in here. So now that I've done all the rendering in Clip Studio Paint, I am going to play around with that rendering now in Photoshop. So down here, I'm just going to add a new layer folder, just call it render. And this is just what I like to do to keep it all neat and tidy. So put it in that little folder there. So all these layers here, so you got the fill, and everything above it is all the rendering layers. So I'll show you one by one what we did. I may as well put this dark shadows one above in there as well, because I think that's now a part of it. So yes, so we have our fill, and then I did the soft shadowing, and then we have the light shadowing. Oh, the lighting is coming in now. And then I have the cell shaded, like the first one that we did, the dark shading. And then I have, it looks a bit blotchy there because we had the other one above, but this is the second layer of the darkening over the top of that, then the lighting, and then the dark shadowing over the top, which I will now make black, like full black, I think. I'm just trying to work that out. You see, I'm not really, I think I know what I'm going to do with this. I'm still trying to work with it as we go. But what I'll probably do is I'll set that top, this is the really dark shadows that I've put on top of here. I'll set that to luminosity here in that mode. Because what that'll do is if I lighten any part of that, so we'll select the dodge tool and we want to highlight the shadows. And if I started to do that, just here, it'll start to blend with everything underneath. And that way it's not so strong, and you know, I do want it to be nice and strong and black, but I think it'll just match my style more if I start to shade it like that. And that's probably what we're gonna do. And then we'll keep the really heavy tones there. So yeah, that's what we'll do. We'll get to that eventually. For now, I just want to play around with everything and try and show you how I do it. So I think what we're going to do is, this is very important to me, this dark shadowing that I did with the inks. So I'm going to keep that on its own layer. Now for all the rest, we're keeping the shine on the top layer as well, because I don't want to touch that yet. But for everything else, that one doesn't have any layer. But for now, I might duplicate this entire thing before I do anything. So duplicate, hide that, just so I've got a backup. Okay, I'm sorry this is all over the place. So what I'm going to do is flatten all of this render. So I'm going to flatten that. Now, because what I can do is start to really, play around with it now. So I'm going to get my burn tool and I'm just going to set it to mid-tones or even highlights actually. So that way I don't otherwise it's going to be too deep. So, and now I'm just going to do where I think it should be a bit darker down here. I'm just going to quickly throw a few soft bits of shading over there, a bit like that. And down near that knee there, I really think this knee needs to be coming a little bit more darker. And especially this back leg. So I'm just going to darken that one a bit more. And I'm even going to darken those highlights because I don't want them to be so strong there. All right, that's all right. So back to that bit. Now, around the ribs there, that looks like it's popping out a bit too much for me. I don't like that. Okay, yeah, that's better. Probably not so intense. Okay. And now, under the arm there, I want to do a bit darker under the arm. And across here, and especially under this palm here, it looks a bit too sharp for me. So I'll just darken that a little bit. Alright, I think the rest is okay. Maybe just that bicep there. And maybe that part of the lower face. Now, just trying to think as I go. Alright, here comes the next trick, which is getting this red. I'm going to control click, which will only select the red areas. Then I'm going to hover over this render. And I'm going to press duplicate so that it comes off. So Control J. And then I usually drag that shadowing underneath the color. Now we're going to show the red. I'm going to get that color mode on the red and change it to color. And you can see, since I've done that, the underneath one is the render. That is set to color, so it's showing all the render here. You can see in the fingers, now the red is actually rendered. Yeah, but what we need to do is probably lighten. I'm just trying to think. So I need to go levels, and I'm just going to lighten that up a bit, just so it's not so, just play around with it so it looks a bit better. That should do it for now. And I'm going to flatten them together, so just Control E, while I have to select both of those and then Control E. Okay, so now we have the red, and I just want to leave that, we're going to show that now and leave it showing. Okay, so the black underneath, I'm just trying to work out if I want to have that full black. Yeah, probably keep it full black. Alright, we're going to do that. And I'm just going to duplicate this render underneath, hide that one. No, I'll keep it shown actually. And now I'm going to play around the levels. I want to go levels, and I'm going to darken it even more underneath. So probably not that. I want to probably darken it so it looks more black. I think that's really going to help. Maybe bring up the shadows a little bit more. So that's what it was, and that's what it is now. And don't worry, because I know it looks quite dark. But what I'm going to do, it gets quite complicated, but what I'm going to do is put a layer mask on it, get my brush tool, bump that up to soft brush, and then I'm going to brush over, on the mask, just parts that I want to really pop out more, like the chest area, definitely. I want that to pop out more, and the head, especially top of the head there, and probably where the nose is, just a little bit. Put around the head, and anything that's directly in where the sun might be showing, which is up this direction. And then just around the hand there. Okay, and this leg can have a bit more over there. All right. So if I hide that and show you what it was before, that's what it was before, and that's what it is now. It's just a little bit more softer. I'm still not happy with that though, so what I'm going to do, I really think we should take advantage of the really dark shadowing that I've got. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to merge them together. I'll just check them, yep. So I'm just going to probably take that down to 80%. Merge them together, but then I think duplicate again. And then I want to rise them up, show that dark shadowing a bit more. There we go, that looks a bit better. So if I hide that and then show it again, you can see we're making the most of that really dark shadowing there, and it's kind of showing his suit a bit more. So I think I'm a bit happier with that. I think that'll be okay. Hide that shine underneath. There we go, that's a bit better. Yeah, we'll do that. Okay, so now I want to move on to the red and try and get that to look a bit better. So where's my original render? Down here. So I'm going to, this is where all the different levels of shading are. I think I want to select the next one. Where is it? Yeah, probably the overall one there. Yep. And I'm just control clicking, so it's actually making a selection of it. We can hide that now. Go back up to red. And what I want to do is get my burn tool out and stick it to shadows. And just under the chest here, I can see it's just looking a bit too flat. So I want to go and shade under that chest a little bit more. And especially under that arm there as well. And around the spider for sure. I just need this to look a bit more rendered. It's not looking as complete. And just around here, I can release that now, that shadow. So we need this to really be a nice deep strong red instead of what it is now. And I'll just grab that render again. So where's that? Down here. Nope, that's not it. And keep going. So I'm still going. Definitely under those fingertips and across there and there. Okay. I'm just burning and darkening these edges here that are really, so it's not so flat. Okay, I'm happy with that. That's good. Now, same thing. I'm going to go down here. I'm going to now control click on some highlights. So maybe that one there. Go back up to the red again. This time I'm going to highlight the midtones. Whoops, I better set it to dodge, the dodge tool. And I'm still on the red layer, remember? So I want to just kind of highlight some parts here that I think would need it. Do that there. That bit there and that bit there on the eye. Definitely this part here as well. Now I've just realised that shine hasn't shown up on the red, so I need to fix that. It's because I've got it on a layer underneath, that's why. So I'm just fixing this, there we go. Especially on the spider here, I want that spider to look nice and rendered and a bit glossy. So just on his arms there. Very important. Okay. So where's that shine layer? Here it is. So if I get the red layer, maybe we'll just hide that. Oh, we can't do that, can we? Oh, yes, we can. Yes. So I've hidden that under the shine layer now. Yes, that's heaps better. So the red is now above our black in there. So that's good. Okay, so the eyes are still looking a bit flat, so I need to fix that and render them a little bit more, make them a bit stronger. I don't want to go too dark because then the red will blend too much with the black, and it's nice to have that separation, the contrast between the two colors. So that's definitely looking a bit better. And I think I just want to add a little bit of a highlight around this part here, and definitely on that part there with the chest. Okay, so it's coming along well. It's coming along.
Okay, so now we're going to dive into some finer details on Miles. and really make him pop. That includes suit texture. We're going to be doing little touches on the webbing that he has, I mean the red webbing, things like that. So, and this is a really good thing to do when you're doing characters, because it really makes your character just stand out. You could leave them as they were. I mean, you could say Miles is done right now, but you'll see the difference once we're finished doing all the detailing. It really makes them stand out on a whole new level. Let's get started. So as you can see here, I'm just starting to play around with the eyes a little bit more. We definitely need some detail in those eyes. So one of the main things we're going to do here is let's work on the red webbing that's on his suit. Now it's quite flat at the moment, and I do have it set to a render, so it does follow the rendering that's underneath. So what I'm doing here is I'm just lightening up the red a little bit. I think it was just a little dark, so let's just bring that up a little bit with a little bit more saturation. And now I'm just going through and I'm just lightening up little bits with the dodge tool that I think need it. So it's just going to help that red webbing kind of pop out a little bit more. Okay, I think that's fine now. That should do it. So I'm going to duplicate the red webbing layer so I have a backup. And then on the one above, I'm going to double click, and that's going to bring up the layer styles. And I want to play around with the bevel so we can make this kind of a little bit more 3D, you know, give it a bit more of a bumpy texture. First, I need to adjust the angle of the lighting and adjust the depth. Bring up the size a little bit and just play around with all this until I'm happy with where it kind of sits. Just play it by eye. So I'm just kind of looking at it. Now I know it kind of looks a bit, it's not perfect, but you'll see what I'll do next to make it fit. Now I kind of want to make it quite chiseled and really sharp because we're going for a bit more of a comic style look. And once I have it just right to the place where I want it, I'm basically going to duplicate one underneath and merge so that it's flattened. We basically just want to flatten that layer style. And then I'm going to go into the filters and I'm going to use the cutout filter. This is going to turn it into like a little bit more of a comic style look. So it's not going to be so flat and bumpy and weird looking from that layer style. It's going to kind of turn it into more of a comic style, like posterize it a little bit. So there we go, and basically now what I need to do, probably get the hue saturation and bump up that saturation a fair bit, and then that's working pretty well now. I'm really happy with that. So that's before and that's after. And you can see the difference that makes just by adding that level of detail to just the webbing alone. The next thing I need to do here is to duplicate another one of these underneath it. And then I'm going to darken it down completely to black. And then I'm going to adjust it a little bit, just move it out. And you can see what it's doing now. I'm giving it that kind of beveled, like it's lifting off the suit a little bit. Just by adding that darker shadow underneath. And if I add a stroke to it with the layer style, I can just make it that little bit thicker, so that it's kind of holding it all together. Just by making it a little bit thicker and then adjusting it underneath until I'm happy with it. And then we're going to flatten it together by, I just like to put another layer above and then merge them, and that'll flatten it. And then play around with the opacity so it's not so intense. We don't want a super strong black, just to take it down a little bit. The opacity, and there we go. I'm pretty happy with that now. Another thing I could do is get the red layer and just play around with the color balance. So if I just select the shadows and just add a lot more heavy blues and the cyan to it, I think it's really going to bring out, like, you really want to make it look a bit more dense, a little bit more darker in those areas, and then select the highlights and we'll make those more of the reds, strong reds, and definitely the yellow. But it's just before and that's after, you can see there. Probably take it down a little bit so it's not so intense. Then I'm going to merge them together, and just by playing around with the color balance on that red has really kind of just made it fit a little bit better, so it's not just an exact flat red or just red. If I add those little blue tones to the shadows and then the warmth to the highlights. It just makes the colors look a little bit better. So now I'm going to try and add a bit of lighting around the edges here. So I really want to play around and just those bits that I've left around the black, I'm going to really fill in with this nice blue color, because I'm kind of thinking ahead here, and I know that my city backdrop is going to have snow and ice, like it's going to be very, it's in winter time, so I know that I'm going to have this lighting effect to it. So I'm giving it a nice blue kind of tone just around those edges there, and it's kind of going to really make him pop off the page a little bit more, or the poster, and it's just kind of coming off the snow or the ice that might be on the buildings. It's just kind of reflecting off from the sun, so it's more of an underlighting touch.
Okay, so we're going to do the suit texture now, and I've got a really good screenshot here. It shows it nice and clear, and you can see that the suit texture is kind of an oval shape and they're all kind of bunched together. So we're going to do something like that, but I'm going to do it in Adobe Illustrator. If you haven't got that, Photoshop's fine. I just preferred working vector for a little bit. Okay, zoom in, and I'm just literally going to start just get my shape, and I'm going to get a circle just like we saw on the suit, and an oval, a black circle oval like that. Maybe a little bit taller. I'm just going to look at Miles as one. Okay, and then I'm just going to hold Alt and Shift so it locks it in place. And I just want to move it across about probably there. And then I'm going to press Control D to do the exact same action I just did. Zoom out, and I'm pressing D a few more times. Okay. Now what I want to do is select all of those, and I'm going to move them down but across as well, and probably keep them about there. And this time I'm going to do what I did before. I'm going to go hold Alt and Shift. I'm going to go down, and then bam, leave that there, and then Control D will just duplicate that again. Do a whole sheet. So I'm going to grab all of those and shrink them down even more. And then I'm going to do it again. I'm going to hold Alt and Shift about there, I think. Yep, so Control D. There we go. So yeah, now that we've got the texture, what I'll do is I'll grab all of that. We're going to copy it and then bring it over to Photoshop and plonk it in here. So above the render. So I'll just place it right there. There we go. So what we always have to do, just keep in mind, when you have this texture, just duplicate and then hide the original. Always hide the original, because you're going to need to copy it and copy it and copy it again and again, because we're going to be using and warping different sections. Okay, so I'm going to size that right down until I think it's a good size. I'm going to start with the head actually. Let's do the head first. Okay, I'm happy with that. I'm going to settle with that size. I think that'll be fine. So for the head, I'm going to wrap it around. So I'm angling it to make sure that, because his head is angled, so I'm going to angle it so it's the same tilt. And now I'm going to literally, I'm just going to go into liquefy. I might actually start with the bulge. So you see this one here, I can actually bulge things out, make it quite large, and then I'm just going to click that a few times. There's that one. And then I'm going to tuck in all the edges. So just move in all the edges from the outside in. So now that that's wrapped around the head, I will just cut around it. An easy way to do it is to just select, like control click on your full fill, and that'll just select his entire body. And then I'm going to invert that and delete. So let's delete that part, but we still need to get our eraser out and start deleting these parts manually around that are just floating over his chest and stuff, because we don't need all that. That's scrap. That's how I do my textures when I put them on characters. So we use liquefy. Another way you can do it, Control T, and then we're going to tilt it again. Control click inside your transform and press warp. And then you can just pull in the edges like this. And there you go, and I press enter, and so that's a similar effect. Whoops, I zoomed in a bit too much. Yeah, so, but we'll stick with the other one. See, that's a lot better. I'm happier with the other one. I'll be adjusting that later properly, but for now, let's just start wrapping it all around the body and then we'll go from there. So I've fully wrapped that texture around Miles's body now. So basically, I'm going to try and make this texture blend a bit better with his body. So to do that, what we need to do is, I'm just going to hide that right now, but go down to this is my full render underneath. So this is just all the black render, the rendering. So you can see it there on its own layer. Basically what I'm going to do is go up to the texture. This is the texture. I'm going to control click. We can now hide that, I don't need it, but we have a selection. So I go down to that render, and then I'm going to press duplicate, control J. And what that has done, if you just have a look, and I'll move that, you can see that it's literally just grabbed the rendering underneath and turned it into dots. So I can put that back to where it was now. And basically, I'll call that texture. New, and now we can do whatever we want with that. So what I like to do, I'll just duplicate that for a backup. I always like to do that. And so basically now what I'm going to do is play around with some levels. So let's go and play around with this. So we'll get that mid one, and you can see what I can do here. I can actually lighten it, darken it, do whatever we like, and it keeps the render, like I said, the shading. I can go super strong with the lighting and super dark if we want to, and that'll bring out a pretty cool effect because it's going to keep the highlighted parts with a little bit of a texture and the darker parts as well. Let's just see what that looks like. You can see it goes all through his suit. I can see I've made a bit of a mistake there around his waist with it, but that's okay. I'll fix that later. Yeah, so basically what we can do with that, I don't want it to be super strong. We don't want the texture to overpower our character and it hides all of that shading that we've gone through. So I'm going to probably take that down to 50% and then see what that looks like. See, I'm pretty happy with that at 50%. And if I just look at his leg here, you can get a good sense of it. So it actually looks like it's darkened a bit in areas. Yeah, so what I'm also going to try, let's duplicate it again, but we will just put that back to 100. But we're actually going to take the fill down. And what that's going to do is it's still hiding it completely. So you can't even see this second version anymore. But when I'm taking the fill down, what that does is if I can double click on this layer, it's still going to show any effects that we do in here, which means I can do maybe a bevel, and we'll probably change that onto the outside somehow. I'm just playing around really, it's just fun to test things out. We'll just go depth, take the size down a little bit to about 2. See, that's a little bit better. That's kind of what I was after. I just really want to shine that edge and get the darkened part on the inside. So I'm going to press OK. So basically now that I have that beveled look now, I'm going to do a mask, put a mask on my layer. I'm going to get the soft brush up here, something like that. We need to try and fade a lot of this back, like a lot of it. Toning it down wherever I think it needs it, so I might even go quite dark in there. Okay, I'm quite happy with that now. I've gone through and I've toned it right down. So we have that nice suit texture now. I wouldn't mind adding a little bit more shiny parts to it, if you know what I mean. So if I make a selection, grab like a nice white highlight there, really bright one, and I'm just going to swipe over certain parts and just deselect and we'll just see what that looks like. So there's a couple of sections that'll have really kind of prominent dots like this. So I don't mind that really. We're only going to go in certain areas, so really just like that on the shoulder there, and really get that dotted effect. Okay, that should do that for the texture. And now I just need to try and play around with the outlines. So what I will do is get the outline layer. We're going to set it to luminosity. This is what I always do. And then I'm going to get my dodge tool. So basically I want to lighten the shadows, which are the black outlines. I want to lighten them up. So just around some edges here. And especially around here on these reds, you can see I can really lighten up the shoulder there and bring out that red color. This is the lightest part of the eyes there.
And the rest is pretty straightforward now. I'm just doing the webbing, so the web's shooting out of his hands, and it's all the same kind of process we've done. So I'm going to be doing the outlines right now, and I'm just cleaning that up and then adding all the extra details into the webbing, just with the inks. And I'm just thinking of all the little cool little details that we can add into the webs that you might see in comics and stuff. I really love the way they do that, and I want to make it look a bit more organic and a bit gooey and stretchy. So I'm trying to think of that as I go. It's all about just adding these little notches and twists around one single thread. So you've got to think of it as one single thread, and then just keep kind of bending and wrapping these extra little bits around it, and then take your time and erase parts out. And I just find that works quite nicely, and it can work well. And then after a while I'll just start doing the flat colors, and I'll just lay them in. And then you already know the rest. We just do the flat colors, then I do all the shading, then I do the lighting. And when I get to certain parts of the web, I want to add a little bit more dimension. So I'll actually select little sections and then leave other ones out that won't be darkened. And that way, if I darken just the back webbing and keep the foreground one a little bit lighter, we're going to get more dimension rather than it all being the same tone. And there we have it. That's it for this week's tutorial. We've done a lot today in this one. So I hope you got a lot out of this today. And next week we'll be doing the background. So that's what we've got to look forward to, and I'll see you then.